went through about 160,000 miles of different test procedures on the dyno. After that torture test, the engine was put into a truck chassis. We went to the North Carolinas to a lumber camp. We towed for one whole day lumber uphill with about 55 tons worth of lumber. The next test the truck went through, which took into Miami Homestead Racetrack. Took a fully loaded trailer, which is 11,300 pounds, which happens to be two fully equipped NASCARs. We ran the truck 24 hours non-stop at full throttle. After that test, we took engine and transmission, put it into a rapid chassis. Signed up for the Baja 1000. Now our intent was not to win the race, our intent was to prove that even though the engine is turbocharged, it has no problem handling a desert environment. Ironically enough, we made podium finish. So after all those tests, the engine was toned down at the Detroit Auto Show. We measured every single component, and the worst discrepancy from original specs was 100 millimeter, which means at 165,000 miles, the engine was good to go the same distance and more without any problems. So that's a little bit background to the durability of that engine. Now, what makes an EcoBoost engine an EcoBoost engine? It's the combination of three technologies. It is turbocharging, direct fuel injection, and variable valve timing. And one of the components of that system, turbochargers, the first one is already taken off the engine. It's on the table to our left. The second one is being disassembled at this point in time by John. We utilize two small turbos. The advantage of two small turbochargers is that they spool up immediately. The so-called turbo lag that we had in the past is eliminated. Now, from a longevity standpoint, we have a high-pressure oil feed, and we have water cooling on that turbocharger. So from a standpoint of operation, you don't have to stop the engine and warm it up before you can drive the car. Stop the engine as you crank it over, it already is supplied with oil and coolant. You drive the vehicle without any problem. When you come home, you don't have to idle it down to cool those turbos. You can just shut the engine down as is. We use a siphoning system to actually still run coolant over the turbo. All the oil that at this point in time, as it shuts the engine down, is on the upper portion of the head of the engine, trickles over those turbos to ensure that we have lubrication while the turbo cools down. So no special treatment required to drive this engine. It works and operates just like any other engine in our lineup. The other component on the EcoBoost engine is your direct fuel injection. For that matter, direct injected engines have two fuel pumps. One sits in the fuel tank, that is your supply pump. It brings the fuel into the engine compartment at roughly 65 psi operating pressure. On the engine, you got the high pressure fuel pump, and that's the little guy right here in my hands. This pump is a plunger type pump driven off one of the camshafts. Takes the fuel at 65 psi, increases the pressure up to 2400 psi. Now, the average operating pressure on our engine is about 1100 psi. The reason why we go with the direct fuel injection, it requires less fuel to get the same amount of work done. Now, if you wonder how much fuel does one of those engines actually consume in one single ignition cycle, it's about 10 milligrams worth of fuel. Now, that in itself doesn't mean a lot. So, let's say you got this little water bottle in your hand, sir. If you want to hold it up, please. That's roughly 350 milliliters. If you want to fill that bottle with one of those fuel injectors, it takes 24,000 injections to fill that bottle. So the challenge for you all when you leave this auto show is, as you have one of those bottles of water or a can of soda, take 24,000 sips. That gives you an idea about the efficiency on those engines. Now that's also where the fuel economy advantage comes from. The less you burn, the better off you are, obviously. At the same time, the less fuel you burn, the cleaner the emissions, the less emissions you produce. And that's the eco standpoint, the eco aspect on that engine. Now the third part of the EcoBoost technology is the variable valve timing. And if you look at the end of the camshaft, you got those two drum assemblies. Those are the actuators. Those are little clutch packs. We use the oil pressure inside the engine to apply pressure on those clutches. That allows us to slow those cams down. To raise the pressure, it advances the timing. The interesting fact on those engines is that we have a 60-degree overlap, which means we have intake and exhaust valves open at the same time for a fairly long period of time. What that means from a functionality standpoint for the engine, you tell the engine you got a lot of air in the combustion chamber at this point in time. In reality, you have the air went out the exhaust. But the more air you put into the combustion chamber, the less fuel do you need to run an efficient combustion. So we always kind of cheat the engine. We always run it on the lean side. Now, in the past, the lean running engine had issues because it heated up. And hot running engines don't last that long. to take care of heat issues inside that engine. We have a system built into the lower block that continuously squirts oil underneath the pistons. So we continuously cool those pistons. Those are the hottest spot inside your engine. In addition, when the fuel gets injected, fuel now enters the combustion chamber in a direct injected engine separate from the air. So the moment the fuel comes in, that vapor helps to cool down the combustion chamber as well. So with all those different steps and measures in place, we can guarantee that you have a cool, efficient running engine at any given time. And since we have one of those heads in front of us, if I tilt the head, you can see that we have a steel line up top. The fuel injectors are directly attached to that line. They're electronically controlled. If you would have a diesel engine in front of us, it's referred to as the common rail. Hence, you got the common rail diesels. On gas engines, the terminology of a common rail really didn't make it into the vocabulary of the engines, so it's called the fuel rail or the fuel line. If you look at the combustion chamber itself, on our V6 configuration, we have the injectors sitting offside. The reason why we put it this way is we got the two fuel lines fairly close together. We have to run a fairly short line only from the high pressure fuel pump to the fuel rail itself. So it's a matter of efficiency and how much material are you going to use on that engine. If you would take a really close look on those injector nozzles, you'll find out that there's 6 openings on them. They're super small openings, and that's what guarantees that you get a nice mist in the combustion chamber rather than droplets of liquid. Because as you know it, liquids don't burn, it's the gas that burns. So the faster, the more efficient you can turn liquid into the gas, the better and the more complete is the combustion inside the engine. We got the intake valve, the exhaust valve, spark plug system dead center. If you look at the inline 4-cylinder configuration, we got a 2-liter engine right now, which you can get on the Edge and on the Explorer. On the 4-cylinder engines, the injectors are sitting dead center, where we have the spark plug on this engine. The spark plug sits a little offside. It's all a matter of how you lay out the combustion chamber for the efficiency of the engine. Also interesting, if you look at our valve system, we have direct operated valves rather than using rocker arms, which means less moving parts, less mass, less weight on the engine. As a matter of fact, this engine bed, which means with liquids and all the fluids inside, is only about 650 pounds. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we keep working on that engine until we have all the components on the tables in front of you. As we come to the lower section, the pistons and all those things, we notice that everything is overbuilt. And that is the intent. We built this engine stronger than it needs to be, so we can make sure that you have a long-lasting engine, no matter how you're going to use that truck. So once again, thanks for your interest. Thanks for staying here with us. Enjoy your afternoon here at the Ford display. I'm going to hand over to my colleagues over at the Great Escape game for a little bit of fun and entertainment. So once again, thank you very much.
Might have helped. Open the floodgates again. Alright, thank you much. I'm so proud of me. Hey, I don't complain. Closed, I would have played that box of cookies for a passport with all the stamps in it. Do you have that box?
I haven't gotten my box of cookies yet. Yeah.
Perfecto.
Wow.
Tagliatini robot.